Hello Stampers. I wanted to share a card that I created with you. My very favorite stamp set this year has been Betsy's Blossom, Stamping Up Betsy's Blossom. So I wanted to try to see what I could do with some fall colors since it's October. And I love fall colors. I also just got the wood grain embossing folder. I don't know if you can see that if I tip it a little bit. And I really love that wood grain embossing folder. So I wanted to try to use a bunch of things that I had. And I love punches. As you can see, I used 3 different punches on this. So let me tell you how I started. First of all, as I said, I used Betsy's Blossoms, and I used the large flower, the small flower, and this is the first time I've used the leaf on this. I usually use that bird. I love that bird. So I used that, and I wanted a sentiment, so from the Always Thankful stamp set, I used the Grateful sentiment from the Always Thankful stamp set. Since it's autumn, grateful seemed like a good sentiment to have. So to start with, the card that I created, as you can see, opens this way, but today, for whatever reason, I was in the mood to turn my card the other way. So I used basically 3 different pieces of cardstock. I used white, and you can see that there are, like, white is used in several different elements. There are several elements that I use the white for. I used the chocolate chip cardstock for the background, and this is cut 4 1/4 by 11. Using my score pail, I scored it at 5 1/2, and then using my bone folder, I made a nice crease with that. I also used more mustard, and this is cut at 4 and 5 1/4, just so it fits really nicely on top. And then I used a scrap piece of close to cocoa because I only needed that for the little scallop. So the first thing that I did, since I'm going to start from the bottom up. I made my card background using my score pail and bone folder and a paper cutter. Then I used the Stampin' Up wood grain background set, and embossing folder. And when I use this, I put my paper right to the edge, and then I run it through my Big Shot, and it comes out so beautifully. I just love the way it comes out, and I love the knots in this background set. So I adhered this just using double-sided adhesive. Snail would work great. A lot of people say that when you're using something with texture, the double-sided adhesive doesn't work very well. You should use stamping dimensionals, but I actually find that this actually works okay. And I didn't really want this to stand up. I wanted this to lay against my card. So I centered this on my card. And it doesn't really matter what size card you make. The background that you use is just usually 1/4 of an inch smaller all around than the background stamp or background cardstock that you use. The next thing that I did to create this card was I created this strip with these big graphic flowers in Betsy's Blossom set. I just love, I think they would make beautiful wallpaper actually, or beautiful tapestry fabric, and I think it makes really pretty background papers. So I like to make my own background papers, and generally what I do is I'll take a piece of cardstock and 2, sometimes 3 different colors of ink. This time I used more mustard, and I really inked this up, and I always turn it over because my more mustard is one of my older stamp pads. I've had it forever, so I like to just flip it over and ink it up. I can see what's been inked when I do that, and I like to go off the sides. I'm working on a Teflon sheet, so it'll just wipe up when I'm all done. And I like to put 3 images. I don't know why. 3 just feels like a good number. I'm going to clean this off out of range of the camera. And then I'm going to use pumpkin pie. I just wanted something a little bit darker, so I inked this up, and then I stamped this on. And I like when I do this to have a little bit of white space. This time I'm only going to use 2. With my cutter, my paper cutter, I'm just going to trim this off so that I have about, so that I have about 1 inch of paper So I'll get something that looks like this, or like this. In this one, I don't know if you can see, I used 3 different inks here. I used more mustard, pumpkin pie, and close to cocoa. So you can do 2 or 3 different ones, but it does make really pretty backgrounds. Like you could picture yourself using something like this as a background and then layering on top of that. And I just really like the way that turns out. So I sliced off a piece of that. I'm going to use this one for the card I'm making right now. Since I already have this cut, this has 3 different colors, but still it's going to look pretty. And I placed it so that these, I really love the knots here, so I placed it so that these knots actually stood out. And again, I use either snail or some kind of double-sided adhesive, whatever you have available, you use. So I placed that on there. The next thing I put on was actually this scallop piece. So I took a piece of scrap cardstock close to cocoa, or light brown, whatever color you have around, and using my scallop circle punch, I just cut that out. And you'll notice that I wrote the diameter on top of this because when I'm trying to pick a circle punch, I want to make sure that this scallop punch is actually smaller than the circle punch I'm picking out. So I did that, and I put a stamping dimensional on the back. I wanted this to stick up a little bit. Okay, so when I placed this, I actually placed it so it was a little on my background and a little off, so it looks like that. The next step was to take the white cardstock again, and this time I'm going to use the smaller flower, and the color that I chose to do that one in was really rust. Just wanted a little bit of red. I could have used the pumpkin pie again just to make it simpler, but no. Oops. Ah. Let me ink that up again. Oh, it's going to have a big fingerprint in it. This one is not sticking. The beauty of this is that it will stamp by just pushing down, and then I used a circle punch. I have the 1 3/8 inch circle punch. I think this flower is actually going to be a little too big for the 1 inch circle punch, which I don't have yet. So I think the 1 3/8 works fine. So I have that. This time I put smaller stamping dimensionals on the back of this. And I stuck that on top of my scallop. Oops. And you could put a pearl in the center of that, or some kind of crystal accent if you wanted to. There are 2 more steps to this. I have my leaves. Using this small leaf punch and old olive, I punched out 3, or I stamped 3 leaves, and then since I don't have a punch this shape, I cut the leaves out. And I generally don't like to fussy cut, but the leaves were pretty small, so it didn't seem so bad. So I have 3 of these. And I put a really small stamping dimensional on the back of these. And notice I put it toward the tip. And the reason I did that was because I kind of wanted to slide it underneath. And you'll notice that I put one going up. And I put one going down this way. Put one like this, and they slide underneath there really easily. The last thing I did was to use Grateful from Always Thankful, close to cocoa, and my scallop circle punch, and I punched out the Grateful sentiment. I didn't put a dimensional on the back of this because I felt like I had enough popping up, and I kind of wanted this to slide underneath the leaf, so it looked like that. And that's my card. Fits perfectly in a Stampin' Up! Envelope, and it actually shares the fall sentiments really beautifully. Thank you for watching.